Attention everyone, this is your half-hour call to places. This is Half Hour. You're listening to Dynamic Dialogues. Whether you're a long-standing professional in the field, an aspiring stage manager, or simply curious about what happens behind the curtain, you're invited to be a part of this immersive journey as we explore the intricacies of leadership, entertainment, and what it means to be human. Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Half Hour podcast, Dynamic Dialogues. Here with me today, I have Niko Lambros Smith. He's a dear friend of mine, a colleague, and a professional freelance stage manager who's worked in regional theaters and for multiple Cirque du Soleil shows. Welcome.
Hi, Brian. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to talk a lot about today leading with empathy, curiosity, and kindness, and also adaptive challenges. So what is an adaptive challenge in the first place? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we talk about challenges, it's kind of easy to really break them down into two categories. You have technical challenges, which are ones that can be solved by following like specific steps. And there may be multiple ways to get to it, but there are specific things that you can do to resolve those challenges versus adaptive challenges, which are ones that require more innovative and nuanced solutions. Adaptive challenges tend to be ones that cause a lot more personality clashes because the root causes of these challenges are different perceptions and different understandings and different mindsets, right? So an adaptive challenge is really something that requires more thought and can't be solved just by following a specific set of steps.
Something that you wrote in your article that I thought was really a really good thing to consider too is that you say working through adaptive challenges may seem simple on the surface, but many times they're like an iceberg where the adaptive challenge is just the exposed tip while there are much more larger issues under the waterline. And I think it's important to point out that adaptive challenges are not always going to be the same. And once you figure out how to solve an adaptive challenge with one sort of circumstance or one person or something, that it isn't necessarily going to be the same approach as it was before. And you might have to like have a different approach for the new set of circumstances, or maybe it's a different person or something like that. And we don't always know what those factors are because they're beneath the surface, so to speak.
Absolutely. So when it comes to figuring out what's going on beneath the surface and really diagnosing what are the root causes of some of these adaptive challenges, one way that I learned to think about it is the idea of the balcony versus the dance floor, right? Where when you're thinking about a situation, a show, or an adaptive challenge as it comes up, being on the balcony represents kind of big picture thinking, macro thinking, and looking at all of the aspects that are contributing to whatever situation, versus being on the dance floor represents being in the thick of it, looking at the details, focusing on the finer things. So this is a great concept as a leader to really challenge ourselves to go between the balcony and the dance floor when it comes to working with other people.
Yeah, it is a very, very useful tool to be able to have a different perspective on how things are happening and in different ways, because as stage managers, I feel like are often removed from what's happening. And so we're, I think, in the balcony a lot, especially as PSMs or production stage managers, for those who may not know what that is. And as an ASM or assistant stage manager, I feel like more in the thick of it, so to speak, and we're in the trenches working in the finer minutia of what is happening, the details, and where everything is going and how it's set and what the presets are and all the very minor details of how everything needs to actually work together and come together. And it's important as a PSM to have that perspective and to understand that their perspective is going to be different, and that the way that they're seeing what's happening and how things are coming together, if there's a conflict or whatever, it's just a very important idea to keep in the back of your mind. And it's a, like you said, it's a great tool to have and to use, and to be able to go between those two is also an effective approach, because you don't always want to be in the balcony looking down and seeing the bigger picture. It's not always valuable to be there all the time. Sometimes it's valuable to come down and get a different perspective of what's happening down on the dance floor. And so you can understand the relationships and how everything is connecting a lot better, that you may not be able to see from like the more bird's eye view.
Absolutely. And I think that, you're starting to talk about a big difference in the role of the PSM versus the ASM. And I think that often in the PSM position, it is a more big picture thinker kind of approach that you need, versus when you're an ASM, you're presented with a lot of challenges that are simply technical challenges. And you are able to just look at the fine details and really be in that dance floor mentality. But where we can be stronger as stage managers is having that ability to step between them and knowing when it's time to, oh, maybe I need to actually step back and look at this from a different perspective. One way that I've heard you talk about it before is the idea of zooming in and zooming out. And I think that's a great metaphor for this.
Yeah, and I think it really connects well to empathy as well. I feel like this approach fosters empathy, actually, where when you're shifting your perspective to someone else's, I think that in a way is sort of a definition of empathy, is, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and seeing how they see the situation. And whenever we're zoomed out and we're looking at the bigger picture and everything that's happening, not just in the production, but in other departments that we're also balancing as PSMs, and being able to zoom in into like a specific moment or a piece of what's happening. It allows us to connect with like the ASM, for example, and understand kind of what they're dealing with and how can we support them. Or maybe we need to give them space and let them do their thing. But I think that connects really well to empathy and really being an effective leader. Because if you're not able to do that, if you don't have the empathy, I feel like it's hard to be an effective leader. It's hard to be someone that is supportive and can understand what your team needs, because if you're always in the balcony, you're only going to see that one point of view. You're not going to see anything else, and you're always going to be worried about that point of view, and it's going to be a little skewed, because things aren't going to be just right. The perspectives might be a little off compared to being down on the floor. And so empathy, I think, is a huge side effect to being able to use this skill set.
And we're working in industries, in the entertainment industry in general, but in industries that really require people to live in a more exposed kind of emotional state. So really reminding ourselves to focus on empathy and connection helps us to make the rehearsal spaces and the performance spaces that we're in an easier place for everyone to coexist. I mean, the industry is hard. It's hard working in entertainment. And as much as we can do to make that a welcoming environment, I think that's important for us.
Yeah, I agree. And it's often forgotten, I feel like, that, we work with humans, and humans make mistakes, and humans, like that's just what we do. We're not, we don't have it all figured out all the time. And I think as stage managers, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of being hyper focused on like being like on the dance floor, going with that metaphor, and because you're so entrenched in the details of everything. And I'm specifically thinking of like making a schedule, and how you might work so hard, or there's so many pieces that have to fit together just right. The people have to be there at the right time. Their availability has to line up. You might have to schedule fittings in between all that. You might have to, schedule vocal coachings. You might have more than one room happening at the same time for rehearsals, and you're working on all of the scheduling, and then one cog is fucked up because someone gets sick and they can't show up, or they get stuck in traffic, and it just sort of perpetuates this whole like train wreck of a schedule kind of thing. And I think it's easy to have a reaction to that, and um to respond in like a very non-empathetic way and be mad about it. But at the end of the day, like, we can't control everything. Like, we can try um to be proactive, and we can try to keep all those things in mind as we're making the schedule. But ultimately, like, there are things that we just can't control, and it's going to be a lot more effective for you to respond with empathy and to connect with that person, and then just figure out everything. And yeah, it's not going to be great. It may not look great. It might be stressful. Um, but I think overall, like, the energy that you can put out with that empathy, not only to the person who might be running late or that couldn't come in or whatever that is, but that is also going to come out into the rest of the group as well. And making sure that um, the productive vibe of what's happening continues to go forward, that it doesn't become this like, oh, well, this person couldn't come in, so that's going to fuck up all of our scheduling. But like, to where you can still be productive, you can still work on things, you can still get things done. It just may not look like what you thought it was going to look like. And it happens all the time. It doesn't matter what the day looks like. There's always something that is going to be slightly different.
Always. It's this, the work that we do means that there's always going to be something happening, right? That
Yeah.
prevents it from going as smoothly as it should, or as we think it should.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I like to remind myself, is that, like, we're working with a lot of different personalities. We're working with people that come from different backgrounds, different economic standings, things like that. We're all kind of existing in our own stories. We've all developed different systems of beliefs and values, the way that we want to be perceived by others, and the way that we interact with others. So because of that, conflict is always going to happen. Conflicting values, conflicting beliefs, and it, as leaders, exactly what you're saying, like, we can contribute to the feel in a room so strongly, because we are the ones that are communicating with every department. We're communicating with the actors, performers, directors, the designers, technicians, things like that. So we really influence, or we have the ability to influence so much. And keeping that in mind, conflict is inevitable. And then finding ways to work through that conflict by using empathy, kindness, and one thing that we haven't really touched on yet, curiosity.
Yeah, I think it's important, like you're saying, is that we can set the tone for the day, for the rehearsal period, for tech, whatever for the meeting, whatever we're in and whatever we're leading and we're a part of. Setting that tone going into it is a really important thing. But yeah, let's transition to curiosity, because I agree we haven't talked very much about that. I think of it as like a door. It opens a door up to conversations. It opens up a door to different perspectives, someone else's point of view, and also allows us to let ourselves not know something, or to be a little vulnerable, and to ask questions about things and to learn. How do you view curiosity?
Curiosity, to me, is something exactly like you're saying. It opens a door, it creates space for other opinions, it allows us to question our own beliefs and our own understandings. It kind of opens us up to see different perspectives and remove any assumptions that are blocking us from finding solutions to our challenges.
Yeah, and thinking in the context of adaptive challenges, like we were talking about earlier, curiosity is a really great tool to approaching adaptive challenges because adaptive challenges can be very perplexing and very complicated. And they're like you've said, and we've mentioned that they're not evident on the surface. It's more to what meets the eye. And so I think being curious and asking questions about like, well, why is this person always late? Like what is causing them to be late that I may not know about? And I think having the curiosity, um, just the curiosity just to ask that question to yourself, oh, like I wonder why they're late. Not just like, oh, they're always late. They're constantly late, 5 minutes late, every single day. Instead of like just complaining about it, if you have the curiosity to be like, like I wonder why. Like, why are they late? And then that causes a next step to maybe you have a conversation with that person to be like, hey, I've noticed that you've been late all the time. Like, is there something that we can do to help? Or is there a scheduling conflict that I don't know about or whatever? Like, there's this artist that I work with at work, and we were scheduling her, and she was constantly being late, like every single time. It was always on Thursdays, and she couldn't get childcare. Um, and she was like, "Oh yeah, like I can't get the babysitter till I think it was like 1." So she's like, "I can't be here till 2." And she never told us that. And so she was just late. And I was like, oh, well, if we had known that, we would just schedule you after 2. And so once we had the conversation with her about, oh, well, now that we know that information, now we can, build the schedule a little bit more effectively. That way we don't think you're just not showing up or that you're just being perpetually late all the time, but that there's, a valid reason for it.
That is a great example, and it's one that I've like personally encountered myself like multiple times, where as the person doing scheduling, you don't always have access to that kind of information, and people's circumstances change. Like somebody may have never had an issue with finding childcare, but things have changed. They moved to a different area, or they have a different babysitter or something like that, and they didn't let us know, so we go about assuming that they have this kind of a same availability.
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
that's not always the case. So stepping back and checking those assumptions, that's kind of what we're talking about here with curiosity. And that's also, it goes back into what we're talking about: going up to the balcony, stepping back, zooming out, taking a look at all of the factors that are contributing to a situation.
Yeah, and also in your article, you talk about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So these are kind of concepts that have been developed within like leadership circles, especially from an academic standpoint. And the basic idea here is that a growth mindset allows you to be open-minded. It sees intelligence, abilities, and talents as something that can be learned and enhanced. It's looking at the world as, oh yeah, this is something that can be developed, right? Versus a fixed mindset where it really is like, no, this is the way things are. It's very black and white. It's this way. It's not going to change.
I'm going to take this opportunity just to say next week on my next episode, I'm going to be talking about the balance between education and experience. And everything you're talking about, I think, is kind of a good bridge to that. We'll move on from that, but just want to say that if I'm going to be talking about whether you can take the natural abilities and skills that you have and learn and build on those, or if getting experience on the job is more effective than getting education. So I'll be diving into that next week. So if you're interested in that, check that out next week. But moving on to some practical applications for curiosity and some I guess some tips on how to be more curious and strategies to approach that. What are some ways to practice curiosity that you found to be most effective?
For me, the way that I really tried to develop my curiosity it came from a prompt that I was given, which was a challenge to, instead of reacting to situations, to dive in and ask, can you say more about what you're talking about, right? And so I think that having some phrases like that, can you say more? Or what does blank mean to you? Or I want to learn more about blank. These are things that can facilitate more open communication, which really helps us to get into that curious mindset.
Something that reminds me of that is I think it's a book that we've read called Thanks for the Feedback, and it talks about to first understand. And it goes back to what you said about making assumptions about things and what's actually happening. But having phrases like that are really helpful because it opens that door to understand what the situation is more fully, their point of view, whatever they're trying to say, and it just creates for more clearer communication too. Because if someone says something and maybe you don't quite understand or you don't know what they're trying to get out of whatever they're saying. I'm thinking of like a production meeting, and saying, "Oh, like what do you mean by that?" Or "Can you say more about that?" And it really opens the conversation more, and it broadens it. And or sometimes it might narrow it to where maybe they get more specific about what they're trying to say. They might say, "Oh, I want to have a green telephone," but like that's not very specific, that's not specific at all. So like maybe they want a 1950s green telephone that's rotary and that has like a 20-foot cable. And so I think trying to understand like the more specific nuances of what people are actually saying is a really important way to open up those conversations by being curious.
Absolutely. And that as stage managers, one of the things that we're most responsible for is communication. And this all kind of goes into that, right? Like in order for us to be able to communicate, we have to understand what we're communicating, right? And so curiosity really helps us to do that. I think it also helps a lot when we think of this from the adaptive challenge perspective. Curiosity can really help us to avoid reacting and instead allows us to respond to things. I heard you kind of touch on those a little bit earlier. Do you want to say a little bit more about reacting versus responding?
Having a reaction, and I think is tied into having an assumption about what the other person is saying and having your own idea of what is happening, but being curious and trying to understand what they're saying. It gives you more information, first of all, and listening to what they're saying allows you to actually respond to what they're actually saying instead of just having some sort of reaction based on an assumption that you have about them or what the situation is or anything like that. And there's a lot of communication techniques like active listening that can come into play, and body language and curiosity, all the things that we're talking about to help approach responding to someone with the tools that we're talking about.
You just you said a great buzzword, unfortunately now, but active listening, right? How do you define active listening in the work that we do?
Active listening in the work that we do, man, I think it takes on a form in a lot of different ways. For me, active listening really translates for me to body language a lot. The way that I'm facing, the way that I'm standing, acknowledging what they're saying. And a lot of it has to do with people who are bitching about stuff or they aren't happy with something. And I actually use a lot of empathy during active listening and, hearing what they're saying and empathizing with their point of view and really letting them know that you hear what they say. That's a really important piece of it. And that has helped me to build connection with people by just listening to what they're saying and acknowledging that I hear what they're saying. That goes so far.
Absolutely. I think there's also an aspect of this that has helped me a lot, which is to remind myself that I don't need to be thinking about what I'm saying next. I need to listen to what this person is actually saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And giving them that kind of focus, and then being able to repeat back some of the things that they said, that really helps us in these moments, especially when we're dealing with conflict. That really helps us to ensure that we're communicating properly.
Yeah, it's the communication tools are so important, and all of this really ties into a lot of, basically we're sort of breaking down in general like adaptive challenges and all the things that really kind of go into it, and it's a complicated thing to really understand and to practice, but these are like effective strategies essentially that you can use to really approach, tackling adaptive challenges as they come up, or if you run into something that's you don't quite understand or that is kind of like not really sure what's going on, using things like empathy and active listening and curiosity. These are all really great tools in your tool belt that you can pull out and use that can help you approach solving adaptive challenges. And not every challenge is going to be adaptive. Like you said earlier, some things are just purely technical. And if you're an ASM, a lot of times that purely is a technical, it's like there's technical solutions for a lot of the different things that we encounter. But a lot of times we are faced with challenges that are just not fixed with a technical solution, and they require more nuance, they require more effort, and they require a lot of these approaches to successfully like get to the other side and to actually to solve them in a way that's productive for the entire production. Thank you so much, Niko, for coming on to this first episode of Dynamic Dialogues. It was amazing to have you on. I couldn't imagine having anyone else for the first one. So I really, truly appreciate that. And thank you for your insight and for your knowledge and expertise and all of your empathy and your curiosity and everything that you've brought to the articles and to our friendship. So thank you so much for bringing all that to this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to talk about these things, and always great to talk with you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider checking out the Half Hour blog at itshalfhour.blog, where we have multiple articles around leadership topics, communication tips, and much more. So check it out at itshalfhour.blog. If you'd like to learn more and listen more to this podcast, you can check it out at itshalfhour.blog/dynamic dialogues. We have new episodes every Monday. Click the subscribe button and you'll be notified when they're released.